And what's your take on what's happening with the music industry now, with just the idea of, like, I was buying CDs, but my younger cousins, they're consuming music, but they're not buying it.
Right.
You know.
Well, when the free downloading first started, it really took the wind out of the sails of the music industry. I mean,
Got that right.
It literally, the income was cut in half over a period of several years. It got down to where it was only 50% of what it was, and that really cut out the small, newer artists. But I was an advocate at the time of streaming services that either, because it would compete with the free, that'd either be free with advertising or you would pay a subscription and
So like the
not
Spotify
have the ads.
model, sort of.
What's that?
So like the Spotify, or like what else is, what did my mom
Yeah,
use?
Pandora.
Pandora, yeah.
Yeah. And as it's turned out, that's what has developed. And we're just seeing now where actual sales are going up considerably, or income streams are going up considerably. But the tricky part is that it's still, the songwriters are being shortchanged, and the artists, to some extent, are still being shortchanged. The labels are doing better, but not necessarily the artists. So there need to be, and there's some legislation pending right now, there needs to be some changes made that'll assure that as this pie grows bigger, which it seems to be doing, that the artists and songwriters are benefiting from it as well.
How do you, like, I've always wondered this, and I was going back and forth with this place that was selling my music years ago, and my attorney is Stephanie Hammonds. I don't know if you know Stephanie.
Sure, I know Stephanie. But
that's my attorney, and we were just talking back and forth, and I was like, man, I was moving too fast. Again, I do that all the time. But the auditing of it, like, how do you trust? Because it was people coming up to me like, yeah, I downloaded your album yesterday, and I'm like, damn, I swear I didn't get the money, you know? And like,
Right.
I'm seeing this, why would this person lie to me? You know what I mean? And
Right.
And then I'm interacting back and forth, like the Audit Trail, and that's what I always liked. I told a guy I did some music with for my last album, and it was in, you know, I was working on it for forever, but I released it in 2015, and he was like, why are you still making CDs? I was like, I know how many CDs I printed. I know it's a hard item. I can audit this.
Right.
Whereas digitally, like, how do you?
Very difficult. You know, you've got to have some trust, which is
I was gonna say
crazy word.
The incentivized,
I guess. But it's real difficult. But you know, for example, one of the lawsuits I was involved in, actually, it was against Apple in Detroit, but then we had a companion case against Universal in California. We had two cases going at the same time. One about the recordings and one about the publishing. And it had to do with Eminem's music, and it had to do with this very issue of, you know, how do you audit digital? And at the beginning, they were just giving you gross numbers on the statements. You know, it's, you know, whatever the amount is, you know, $50,000.
We think it was $50,000 this month. Yeah.
For this 6-month period or whatever, and there was no way to really know, well, where did it come from? How, you know, how were you counting it? What was the multiplier even? So at one point, an audit was conducted, and it turned out that they were paying a reduced rate for the streams than they should have by contract. And without getting into too much detail, because this went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, the case in California, what was happening is they were saying that the digital streams and the digital downloads, it was really more about downloads. Again, how do you keep track, right?
Yeah.
The digital downloads, that was the same as selling a CD or a a record, vinyl record, that was normal retail channels, even when it went through iTunes. Okay? In the contract, it would say, for example, for an artist, let's say 15% of suggested retail might be a royalty rate that an artist would get in a major label deal when they're first starting, okay?
Yeah.
But the old school contracts all said, but if we license it to a third party, you get 50% of whatever we get.
Wow.
Okay? Okay, which is, it's apples to oranges. It's a different calculation, but it's still quite a bit more than the 15% of suggested retail.
Sure.
So it was our position that when you license it to iTunes to distribute it, that's a license.
Sure.
So it should have been 50%. And they were arguing, no, that's nowadays normal retail channel. So we couldn't agree. We brought a motion before trial. The other side brought a motion before trial, that we should win. And the judge said, no, let's let the jury decide. So it went to trial, and the lawyer from Universal convinced the jury by using the argument, a record is a record is a record. It doesn't matter if it's a vinyl record or if it's an 8-track tape or if it's a cassette or if it's a CD. Now, downloads, it's a record. We happen to use Apple and iTunes to distribute the record, but it's still normal retail channels. And the jury bought that.
Wow.
Okay? And we appealed to the Ninth Circuit, because it was a California case. They appealed it to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals agreed with us that on its face, it was a license to Apple. So if it's a license, it's 50% of the net that you get.
That's cool.
So, and then they appealed, Universal appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court.
I'm sure they're going to keep appealing.
And the Supreme Court said, we're not going to take it because they don't take most cases unless there's a dispute between different circuits around the country that they want to resolve. And there was no dispute. That was a ruling, and the U.S. Supreme Court said, you're going to have to live with it.
Wow.
So it's things like that pop up that do make changes, because now then there were class actions that were formed against record companies, because we wouldn't have known that but for the audit, and it costs a lot of money to audit. So young artists or starting out artists, they can't afford to hire an auditor and go in and really audit everything.
And what's so funny, and I'll talk offline because I don't want to throw all the business in the street, but my dad's a CPA, but he also develops accounting systems. And in developing accounting systems for over 30 years, he ended up interacting with the artists. So he had to develop his own system and trail of tracking through interest in a series of different songs, because somebody approached, I don't know if you're familiar with this, like it's different groups that approach aging artists, for their whole catalog.
Sure.
And it'll be like, look, we'll give you $250,000 for your whole catalog.
Right.
And then it's like, all right, now how do we quantify, as my dad's
Is
always
it worth
like,
it?
he's big into numbers. I mean, he's always big into auditing. And he was like, how do you audit all this music? And I was like, let me ask Stephanie how to do this. I was going back and forth. And then she was like, that generally costs X amount. And then the firms that generally audit are only working in the interest of either most record labels or huge artists. So it's another one of the variables as we think. And being an artist is tough. And then even when you talk about streaming, as I'm learning through my YouTube plays, and I'm considering releasing a movie through Amazon and Netflix, like getting paid per how long somebody streams it. Like you'll get paid. So the song is 3 minutes, but they only stream 5 seconds of it. So it's like, we're going to pay you based on what the stream would have been for the percentage of the song that they listen to. And I was like, oh man, this is just confusing me right now.
Nothing.
Yeah, it's like, we're going to pay you like a penny and an iota. So it's good to see that as these things are changing, it's attorneys that are working on behalf of the interest of artists, but the systems are becoming so huge.
Oh yeah, and then another problem, for example, I have a client now where we are getting regular royalties from one of the major publishing companies. And they come to me and I review the statements, and I started seeing problems and questions that I had, and I sent the questions to the publisher, and for them it's just a small deal. For my client, it's a huge deal.
Yeah.
But for them, so it keeps going on the back burner. So it's been a year and a half now. I haven't gotten answers to my questions other than, yeah, we think you're right. We're going to look into it and get back to you on that.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.